Hello, and thanks for tuning in to the Cybersecurity Sessions podcast, Season 3 from Netacea. I'm your host, Andy Ash, the CISO at Netacea. We have a special episode today where we'll be discussing the latest news around Oasis, announcement of them getting back together and going on tour. There's been lots of press around the ticket sale process, and a lot of people unhappy with not getting tickets, so we thought we'd dive into the challenges around events like this. Today, I'm joined by two familiar faces to the Netacea podcast, Andy Still and Matt Gracie McMinn. Andy, do you just want to introduce yourself quickly?
Hi, thanks, Andy. I am Andy. I'm CTO and one of the founders of Netacea. So I've obviously been here battling bots for a long time, but this episode is particularly relevant for me because my background is in ticketing sales. So I've sat on the opposite side of this fence trying to sell tickets in really busy events and buy tickets in really busy events. So hopefully that can contribute a bit to our conversation today.
Cool. And MGM?
Hi, I'm Matt, or MGM, and I'm the VP Threat Services here at Netacea, where I'm responsible for our threat research function. So basically we are we were quite interested in the Oasis stuff, and we're spending a lot of time pretending to be attackers in the attackers communities, watching what they're talking about and that sort of thing. So hopefully provide some useful insights.
Thanks, Matt. So before we get started on the actual what happened, quick question to both of you. What's your favourite Oasis song, Andy Still?
My favourite Oasis, that's a tricky question. So what I will tell you is it isn't Wonderwall. No, Wonderwall is one everyone holds up. That isn't even the best song on that album. Champagne Supernova is better. What's the Story Morning Glory is better. Half a World Away is a great song as well. But I think peak Oasis, What's the Story Morning Glory is one of the best albums. You'll get going back and listening to that again on the announcement of reforming. Forgotten quite how good it was. Reminds me of time in the 90s when Oasis were everywhere.
They were. That is absolutely true. Now, I'm going to ask MGM as well, but I do know that MGM is not fully aware of Oasis.
No, I did a bit of Googling on the songs because I'm not really familiar with them. I was about 3 or 4 when the Oasis were quite big, so I don't really remember much of their songs. I know Wonderwall. That's about obviously the main one I know about. Obviously, I've heard of Champagne Supernova as well, Supersonic, and a couple of others. But yeah.
Do you like Wonderwall? Is that a song that you enjoy?
I think I enjoyed it when I was younger, and then going through school where everyone who learnt to play the guitar played Wonderwall. I got kind of sick of it.
Yeah, I think that's sort of where I'm coming from. So definitely my favourite song is Half the World Away. Definitely, that is definitely but partly because it's the theme music for BBC comedy show The Royal Family, and I absolutely love that. Still great today if you've not watched it. But I did have the original demo cassette of Definitely Maybe when I was 17, so 1993, which I was incredibly thrilled with. Apparently, I had an old handwriting on it. And I knew people who knew the band, and I was obsessed with them. At 17, I was obsessed with Oasis. Now, not so much. Not so much. I don't think they got better with age, but that's just my opinion. So, obviously, there's been a whole lot of chatter in the news about this. What is a seminal event? You know, one of the biggest bands in the world getting back together and playing a whole lot of concerts. Did anybody that you know actually got a ticket, either Andy or MGM? Because nobody I know. So my family were trying to get tickets and absolutely couldn't. They were left very frustrated.
None of my family could. We had 4 of us attempting on various different devices, and none of my friends did either. So I didn't know anyone who actually managed to get one.
MGM?
Same for me. I know quite a lot of people tried to. Quite a few members of the threat research team here at Netacea tried to get them. None of us could.
No. So I think, it's completely understandable. There's a lot of disappointed people. It's such a seminal event, like I say. I think we know of one person in the office that got a ticket. We did a quick poll earlier. She's very pleased with herself. Whether she got 1 or 4, whether she's going on her own, I don't know. I suspect she got
I believe she got 4, and then had to find who to give the other 2 to. So I think once you're on there, I think it was we'll get as many as we can.
Yeah,
Someone's bound to want them. Yeah.
Yeah. So just a few stats about kind of setting the scene. So Oasis are going to play to 1.4 million people during this tour, over 17 concerts, according to the BBC. I don't know that off the top of my head, but according to the BBC, that's how many tickets were actually on sale. And we did quite a lot of work over the weekend of the sale, and anecdotally, we saw between 500,000 and 1 million people queuing over various different websites. So to put that into context, it's a big number. It's a very big number, but to put it into context, if that was a physical queue and everybody had a reasonable amount of space to stand up, it'd probably stretch the length of the country. Or fill 40 football pitches if it was that kind of airport queuing system. And it'd be very unpleasant. You would never get to you wouldn't join that queue. It would never form that big. And then of the 1.4 million tickets, if it took 1 minute per transaction on each of the websites that had tickets for sale, a whole year of compute time would be required to process the requests. And that is a significant technical challenge for any organization. Ticket vendors are used to this kind of demand, but scaling to that level is a significant challenge. And it's something that Andy will touch on because he does have quite a lot of experience in this. And, I think we all have experience in hosting high volume websites. It's not straightforward. Mm-hmm. This is made more challenging by the fact that there are malicious actors out there who are trying to scalp tickets. That adds vastly to the number of entities that are trying to buy the tickets. Like I say, we were watching this very closely over the weekend and in the lead in. MGM, so what chatter did we see from the online bot operators and organized gangs around this ticket event?
So from the very moment the tour was announced, we saw huge amounts of interest in it. A lot of these groups either were involved. So there's sort of two types of groups. There are those who were involved in ticketing before, in which case they've hit things like Taylor Swift's Eras tours and earlier things as well, and they've made a lot of money. So they were really keen to, when they heard the news about Oasis, they're like, great, payday for us, basically. We can make more money if we can attack this successfully. So let's figure out how they start planning their attack. There are other groups as well who saw, the second type of group basically saw other groups making a lot of money on the Eras tours and other earlier tours and so forth, and so decided to basically get into the game themselves. It's a way for them to make money. So the second that the Oasis tour release dates were announced, they started going, right, we better start building tools, cyber weapons that can allow us to attack these ticket drops, these releases, and get as many tickets as possible. Try to bypass any security controls that are put in place, any sort of limits on numbers of purchases and stuff like that. We need to figure out ways around those controls, and we're going to start building tools. So within 36 hours of the announcement of the tours, that I think it was on a Saturday, if I remember correctly, within 36 hours there were tools had been, the people who had started from scratch had developed these tools. And over the next couple of days, they iterated on them multiple times, testing them, making sure they worked, improving them, giving them new functionality and so forth. So that by the time of the actual ticket release, they had a very sophisticated suite of basically cyber weapons, basically, that they could use to attack the drop and make sure they acquired as many tickets as possible. And as part of this, we actually saw almost a small ecosystem develop around it, with people developing individual components that would be needed in the attack and then selling them to someone who was pulling all of these components together. So people were selling like bypasses, I've got a way, I promise I have a way around a queue. I have developed some way to try and bypass the queue. Whether that's true or not is up for debate, but someone who is building a weapon to attack this drop would then buy that component that would allow their users of their weapon to bypass the queue, for instance.
Yeah, and in terms of number of actors we were tracking, is we do have a really big spread of intelligence. Was it basically everybody that we track in this area saying the same thing?
Yeah, pretty much, to be honest. There wasn't even a hesitation. There were no questions around, for most of the groups, there was no question around legalities or anything like that. They just saw it. It was almost Looney Tunes style, dollar signs in the eyes, and they ran straight at it.
Yeah, and it's understandable. I mean, these events are such massive targets for scalpers. we can look back at the Eurovision sale from 2022, I think, and the Taylor Swift you already mentioned. That actually ended up in front of Congress in the US. That was such a is it a national scandal? Is that fair to say? Is this a national scandal? Have we got to that level?
I don't know if I'd say we've got to the level of sort of Parliament calling in people to
I
account.
think we have. The government
Yeah.
have come out and said that they are going to look into this. They have come out saying they were already going to look at the issue of ticket scalping anyway, as a result of kind of previous promises that they've made. They're extending that to cover some of the issues that were raised within this. So ticket resale is one, variable pricing, some of the other restrictions around how ticket selling works slightly different from other industries. So yes, I think this has hit the level of national scandal. I mean, from a politics point of view, it's a fairly easy target. This isn't the, jump on the bandwagon. You can be very popular with a large amount of people by coming out saying you address this against the kind of evil corporations at the back of it. Obviously, the truth is somewhere behind that, but you can see why they're wanting to get involved in this.
Are you saying there's going to be a lot of political tub thumping about this, Andy?
I'm saying there's going to be a lot of political tub thumping, and based on past history, they will probably decide it's a very hard problem to solve and see what comes out of it.
Now it's a good campaign, right? And
yeah,
at a time when there's not a lot of news this time of year, isn't it? So, okay. So, I mean, the news coverage was everywhere, across all platforms, and it wasn't particularly good. It didn't play well at all. So, so I guess there's been, we've already mentioned Eurovision, Taylor Swift, and we could there's Radiohead, etc. There's been a lot of opportunity to address this issue. How are scalpers and bots still so disruptive in this market?
So, I mean, the issue you've got here, if you start from the very simple standpoint, like you say, there was a lot of news coverage ahead of this. This was probably the biggest event in the UK last week, bar none. This was what all the news was about. Everyone was ready for the on sale. It was over 15 years in the making that this was coming. So you end up with a situation where even if there was no bots involved whatsoever, you've got 1.4 million tickets, probably 2.4 million people wanting to go. So there's 1 million more people who want to go. Some of those people are willing to pay quite a lot to go to these events. So even if there was no bots involved, some of the people who bought those tickets legitimately might decide, I'd quite like to see Oasis, but I'd like £1,000 more. So I'll sell my ticket to someone else. So that there's a market there regardless. But what the bots do is obviously see that market and they want to be part of that market. And they're going in with the intent of buying the tickets just for resale, and the intent in buying those at some sort of scale. So it's an obvious market for bots to get hold of. And once they do that, it's actually quite difficult to detect that bot activity. So if you think of the ways that you can stop bots, the easiest way is, what sounds the easiest way is to say that, well, stop them from buying the tickets in the first place, in which case you need to look at the technology to do that, particularly when blended in to however many million other people that you've got there, and their behavior will look relatively similar to those people as well, because essentially they're doing the same thing. So that's the challenge that you've got with bots. There's another approach you can say with bots, which is, well, you stop them after the event, you take the ticket back off them, you stop them reselling it, which is an approach that is taken. So the ticket resellers will monitor transactions as they come in. They will try and extract ones that they consider not legitimate, and they've got different approaches to do that. We're looking at how the orders are placed and how they correlate to each other's, and shared data across them, so ones that look suspicious. They do also do some monitoring of the resale sites to see tickets that are being sold above face value and do some refunding. So the ticket ticket sellers are doing something around that. Now, what would make this problem go away completely would be if no one ever bought one of those tickets. That's how you make this problem go away. There's no market for them. The bots will go away. Now, that, from experience, no matter what you do, is not going to happen. And we've seen in the past people's bans be relatively draconian on the restrictions for using tickets. So insisting on multiple forms of ID once you've bought it, and then other people, they need to see the ID of the people who've bought it, and you need to put that ID in up front. That can have an effect, but what those sort of things tend to do is they end up affecting legitimate fans. So people, if you buy a ticket to go and see something, there's many reasons why 12 months in the future you can't go to that event. You want to pass that ticket on to someone else, which is quite a legitimate thing to do. And if you can't do that, you feel, you're aggrieved against that situation. You've basically spent hundreds of pounds, which you then can't take advantage of. The other aspect of bot and ticket resale and touting is that those people who are driving that market, they're effectively the problem here. They make that market happen, but they're also categorized as victims of this situation. So there is a view that they are being forced to spend those thousands of pounds to be able to go and see the band that they really want to see. This is, you could categorize this as a once in a lifetime thing, similar to Eurovision, similar to Taylor Swift. Will these people tour again? Will Oasis make it through this tour, let alone do another tour? Is the question. So if you are a big Oasis fan and you don't go and see them now, will you ever get this opportunity again? This is not, which, unlike some of the other kind of items we talk about, like PlayStations, there will be more PlayStations at some point in the future, but events are events. Even if you go to this, people will go to multiple dates within one tour because each one is different. So you have that kind of very distinct market, and people will drive that market, but ultimately they're kind of classed as victims, though they are actually the perpetrators of the problem. And you're probably never going to get around that. That feels like a supply and demand issue that is almost impossible to stop. So what we end up having to do is try and remove those bots from sale point, and that is a very complex technical problem to solve. And I think there is a sense at the moment that in these kind of things, the bots are winning, and the attackers are managing to get sufficient success. And from our point of view as a bot management company, in terms of the general level of defense across the industry, we are seeing that as well. We're seeing that actually there's a kind of sense at the moment that a lot of the bot management techniques that are undertaken not by Netacea, I will call out, we take a different approach, but as standard across a lot of our competitors, are starting to fail because the attackers have actually determined effective bypasses to those systems. So certainly and this is speaking as outsiders, so we don't know what methodologies the ticket sellers were using, but we certainly, from what we hear from chatters, a lot of the standard bypasses that are used on other systems, they were working to bypass bot protection. And this is largely down to the kind of approach that's often taken to bot protection, which is looking at things like, for example, capabilities of browsers that are connecting to them, the devices that connections are coming in from, IP address that you're connecting from.
It's that client-side fingerprint that essentially is what they're looking for.
Yeah, that's essentially what we see. That was a traditional way of detecting bots, and what we see from kind of our approach to detecting this, but also from what Matt and team see, is that it's easily bypassed. So the approach that Netacea takes here is to look at intent and activity, and that's kind of the only way that we see that you can start to effectively detect that if you're going down the kind of upfront approach of trying to stop them at the point of purchase.
Yeah. just to go back to a point you made a little bit earlier around the kind of secondary marketing and the demand for that secondary marketing isn't just from bot vendors. It is from people who bought tickets who genuinely then can't go to the gig and don't want to lose what is a significant amount of cash. That secondary market makes it easier for the bot operators to actually, this is a mature marketplace. There are paths to revenue or revenue streams that are available too. So that already exists. And the interesting piece for me is for other high value goods and items, such as, we think PlayStation 6 is probably on its way. The PlayStation 5 drops, they were very much, scalped and then sold potentially individually. Other secondary markets are on the way. It would be my feeling. It isn't, the ticketing secondary market is just the first example of this.
I mean, we already see it for sneakers, don't we?
Yeah, exactly. There's a stock market for sneakers, but yeah, tickets and sneakers are the two that are clear. But I can't get past thinking that as more high value, especially tech goods come out, you're going to start to see these these official secondary markets.
I'd also note that we've seen in this specific release for Oasis, previously scalpers who bought up tickets on previous tours for other bands and so forth sold them, tried to resell them typically through the legitimate marketplaces. In this case, we think at least partially because Oasis themselves said they didn't want that to happen, and there has been more crackdown on this. They've actually started setting up their own marketplaces, often in hidden forums like Telegram and Discord. So we saw that with this release.
It's interesting, yeah, because I mean they are different. So tickets and sneakers are different in that they are unique limited edition items. The tech products like your PlayStations, they go via eBay, etc., don't you? Because essentially you want a PlayStation, that's they're all the same. If you want a ticket, you've got things like the level of ticket, the date, the venue. There's a lot of variance on a ticket. I mean, tickets are, in terms of the complexity of selling them, they are one of the most complex items, just because any individual ticket is unique. You can't sell that more than once, which, in terms of the challenge of the technical overhead, makes ticketing way more complex than anything. Most things you sell, you just have a bucket of so many and you knock them down till they're gone. When you're selling tickets, you essentially have to allocate a specific ticket to a person, and then they pay, and then you allocate it to someone else. Where you've sold the same ticket twice, that's the point when you get a lot of angry people.
Well, you get angry people who actually meet each other as well, which is suboptimal in the process. But it is, you were saying, the human desire for these high value scarce items. The kind of, I want a PlayStation 6 and I want it now, and I'm actually happy to pay $3,000 for it rather than 600 quid because I can. That drives similar behavior. Yes, I can't sell it to two people at the same time because I have to send it to one of them. But yeah, I do think that this is going to become, the secondary market piece is going to expand over the next few years. Just to move on to something a little more technical, Matt, we talked about what we saw in the lead into this event. What did we see during and after? What was the path taken by the bot operators, and what was their return on investment?
So they were, frankly, a lot of them were quite successful. They essentially, the second they were up, ready to go, they had their weapons all spooled up, ready to fire. The second the tickets dropped, their bots were flooding the waiting rooms, the queues, and so forth. And essentially, the attackers were largely trying to either get around the queue, essentially queue cutting, or they were trying to basically put so many of their sort of fake personas into the queue that they had a very good chance of getting through to the front and getting as many tickets as possible. To give you an example, the one group we monitored, they were able to get about 1,500 tickets, quite a substantial share of it for such a small group. Bear in mind that's a largely inexperienced group who've never previously been involved in ticketing, but they managed to get 1,500 nonetheless. Their ROI, so the amount of the profit they made on those tickets, we estimate to be about £550,000. So that is a phenomenal amount of money. One other individual we tracked. So this is an individual. He built his own tools. He launched his own attack. He was able to acquire about 228, I think it was, tickets, and he made a profit of about £83,000 on them. So you know
Wow.
that people made a lot of money basically on that day. You know, more than people are making a year. Frankly, it's one of the reasons this is such a popular attack and so
Yeah.
difficult to deal with. People are paying their mortgages, they're feeding their families off the back of this, they're getting rich off the back of this, and they're incentivized to reinvest a lot of that money into future attacks to ensure success is there as well.
Yeah. I mean, it's a lot, and it's not honest work.
No,
Is probably the way to look at it. But I mean, for a weekend, that's a staggering amount, and you know, the return on investment. You can see the effort that's gone into the people who've been scalping. You know, the return on investment is so big. It's not going to go away. It's worth the risk. It's worth the investment of time. It's worth the investment of technology. It's a lot cheaper to run a bot farm than it is a ticketing website. You know, for all the complexity of the bots and the way that they get around protection, it's a box that makes web requests. It doesn't take web requests. It doesn't have to serve anything like a ticket site does. You know, all the images, etc. So the cost is relatively low.
Yeah.
Did we see any evidence of different types of proxies being used to run this, or is that just built into the kind of Adonis bot type infrastructure that already exists?
So in this case, we saw a lot of people using different proxies. So the whole ecosystem around scalping, both for, as you guys were discussing earlier, products like shoes and for events like Oasis, there's a whole ecosystem, a whole industry with its sub-industries built around it. So you have the people who actually use the tools, the scalpers themselves. So they actually often buy the tools from dedicated development teams. Some of the more advanced groups may have their own in-house development teams. And thinking back to my consultant days, frankly, a lot of these groups are better at agile development than a lot of professional companies I used to go into and consult for. So these guys are no joke, they're very serious, very professional. They know exactly what they're doing. This is their day job, this is their night job, this is their weekend job, and they work really, really hard at this. And essentially you've got the scalper bots. They basically usually buy or have their in-house development teams build a tool. You have other sort of specialist groups who build components of those tools, like I mentioned before, like queue bypass systems and things like that, ways of cutting the queue, ways to beat the security controls. You have people provide sort of fake identity. Say some people will have spent months or years. This is all they do basically, is they create fake accounts on the ticketing sites with believable identities and so forth, and they sell those accounts to scalpers so that they can use those accounts to make purchases where they're limited to so many purchases per account. So those people are providing those details to the scalper groups as well. And then you have the infrastructure providers who essentially have huge botnets. Many of these people are frankly criminal. They have taken over their botnets using malware and so forth. So they've taken over, say, your phone or my phone with malware. And now they'll rent out access to that to allow someone to proxy an attack through that phone or our computer. To make it look like it's coming from us, not from, say, a data center somewhere else instead. So all of this combined creates this very sophisticated attack coming from a very sophisticated ecosystem that can be very hard to stop.
Yeah, these ecosystems are evolving all the time as well, getting more difficult to actually identify. I know one of the things that came out in the press over the course of the event was people were being treated as if they were bots. How important is it for ticket sellers to get the balance right between blocking bots and not blocking humans by accident?
Yeah, so I all my family individually got called bots, as well as when we were trying to buy.
And I've met them, and I can say for sure they're not.
That's it. One of my children said to me, "Dad, I'm a bot. Why haven't you told me before now?" So it's like, this is how I chose to break it to you. So, I mean, what you already has, as I mentioned earlier, you have 1 million people there who are not going to be happy at the end of this on sale. You also have a lot of people who've spent a lot of time in this. So I don't know about the others on this call. I was probably spent 4 or 5 hours across the day trying to buy a ticket. It's already frustrating enough waiting to get in the queue. When you get in the queue to actually get to the front, and then you're told you can't buy a ticket because you're a bot when you're not a bot. That anything like that, there's already a sense of unfairness that is there, and to have that taken away, the chance when you've actually got there to take away, similar to other things like people being knocked out of the queue ahead of time, and all these kind of things all these stories that you hear create this sense of dissatisfaction. That sense of dissatisfaction plays out on social media, in the news stories. This is what hits the headlines. What doesn't hit the headlines at the end of this day, from my background as a ticket seller, you don't get stories out there of 1.4 million happy people who've got the tickets. You get a small group of people who are unhappy for various reasons, and the amount of kind of conspiracies that built up in people's minds as to why that was. I was responsible for the Glastonbury sales back many years ago, and I still remember on Twitter reading the next day, yet again, people from Wales have not been allowed tickets to Glastonbury. And I can tell you for a fact that was not the case. There was no block of people from Wales, but people will put that. And I think that's the sense of why it's really important that you are not essentially accusing someone of fraudulent behaviour, which it's quite an accusation. People don't like being accused of that, and on top of the unpleasant experience already had in trying to buy this. That's why it's really important to get it right. It's also really important to get it right the other way. So it's really important that, obviously, from what we've heard from Matt, bots were successfully getting through this process, and humans were being categorized as bots. As clearly that those attempts weren't working correctly. But it's important to have that defense in place to stop this activity, but it's really important that is accurate. It's also, when we look at really busy on sales like this, people's behavior is slightly unusual. So normally if I'm buying a ticket, we will not have 8 or 9 devices coming from my house trying to buy a ticket at the same time. We will not have all those computers potentially with multiple sites open, pressing, refreshing, and trying different things to get different things working. So behavior is already unusual. So any of those kind of normal defenses that you would put in place that look at that kind of device activity, or down to individual households, they are not typical. And as I say, we've no idea what the methodology used to detect bots here, but I suspect it was that kind of thing where unusual behavior was being seen, but that unusual behavior was usual in that, or legitimate in that situation, because
exactly. And the kind of frustration of being in a queue for 3 hours drives different behavior from humans. It doesn't drive different behavior from bots. They still do exactly the same thing as they've been programmed to do. So it's more likely that the humans will look bot-like and the bots will look human-like.
Well, yeah, I mean, humans keep pressing refresh on the
we're very bad at waiting.
Not to. You want to make
very British,
happen.
Yeah, a very British thing to queue, but to complain while you're in the queue. So I think the refresh button is the complaint, basically, isn't it? So
yeah.
We're a little bit up on time, so I just want to ask kind of one more question to both of you. Is this a winnable battle? Can there's, as you say, 1.4 million people will get tickets and they'll be very happy. There'll be 1 million people who are a bit annoyed about the whole thing, and left with a bitter taste in the mouth. Is this a winnable battle?
So
we keep it.
Is it? I mean, I guess your question is the battle to stop bots reselling tickets a winnable battle? The answer to that is yes. It's a multi-pronged battle. So part of this, as we said, as bot protection vendors, we would say stop them at source. We at Netacea have the best bot detection approach. we can detect that bot activity as it happens, and we will detect as much as possible. Will we get all of it? Probably not in that situation. So you then need to back that by post-transaction analysis, cancelling tickets. You then also need to back it by clamping down on the resale of tickets. Ideally, you remove them from the genuine secondary markets. That already has a big impact because there's a lot of people who buy a ticket through one of those markets, a lot less will buy it by a dodgy Telegram channel.
Yeah.
So you do that, you drive that down, and the last level, the ultimate draconian level, is that you start blocking the usage of those tickets and actually punishing the people who've spent the money to try and drive down the market. So it's a winnable battle, but it's not an easy. There's not an easy fix for this. In the same way, there's not easy fix to have a ticket insight that stays up when it's got 2 million people trying to buy tickets.
Yeah.
It's a hard problem to solve.
It's a very hard problem to solve.
Yeah.
MGM, from your point of view, the kind of holistic approach. I know we were well informed as to what was happening on the day, and in the lead in. Anything you want to add to that kind of, is this a winnable battle? How do we, what data do we need to try and beat these guys?
I think I would distinguish that I think it's a winnable war. I think if in my mind, every battle, every event is essentially a battle, and it's important to go into every single event, every single battle with as much intelligence and much awareness of what the attackers are going to do, what their objectives are, what their capabilities are, what technologies they have available to them, what their tactics are going to be in that battle. And the more intel you have, the better your chances of winning that individual battle. And I think if we win enough battles against these guys, like I said, they're paying their mortgages, they're making money this way. This is their job. If they stop making money, if the ROI becomes too expensive for them, they will back out of the war. And ultimately, we would win at that point. So I do think it is winnable. I think intelligence is core to that, because by understanding what the attackers are going to do, all those things I just said, the tactics, the techniques, the procedures that attackers are going to employ in the pursuit of this objective, if you can counter all of those and prevent them in one battle, then they'll come up with new ones for the next battle. But if you keep blocking those, eventually they're going to go, I'm losing too much money on this, or I'm just out of ideas. I can't beat these guys. I'm going to give up and move on.
I'm going to go on to PlayStation 6s. I'm going to go on to whatever it might be next.
Yeah, exactly.
50p coins, whatever's got some value in the market today. Very good. Okay, so on that note, I'd like to thank Andy and Matt for joining me today. I think that was a really good discussion on what is a very, very, very relevant topic at the moment. If you have any questions for us, please either leave a comment if you're listening via Spotify or YouTube, or you can mention us on our X account at CybersecPod, or email podcast@netacea.com. Please do make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And finally, thanks once again to the Netacea team for joining me today. And thank you for listening. We'll see you next time for the cybersecurity sessions.